Are you trying to develop characters for your story, whether that's one character or many? How do you know how many characters is the right number for your story? What if, do you need one protagonist and 10 supporting characters or two characters to really tell the story you want? Well, you're going to want to stick around because on our discussion today, we're going to chat about character development and what is the right number of characters. Welcome to Kaufman Writes. This is my daily creative writing live stream to give you inspiration, beat procrastination, and maybe get some writing done. Welcome, my friends. We're going to hop straight into a writing sprint. Today, we're going to be doing 2 writing sprints, 20 minutes a piece, and then we'll hop into our character development discussion. All right. Now, if you were here with me yesterday, you knew my story, The Last Scarecrow, finally hit the midpoint. Oh, I was waiting for that moment for so long, my friends. Hey, what's up, Atomic? Welcome, my friend. I was like, yesterday's like writing, and I think I fixed the connectivity. Hey, what's up, Silent in the house? Welcome, friends. I was like, yesterday's connectivity like kind of sucked. So I was like, well, I'm still traveling and out of my normal studio. I got like a cool looking anime background on the TV. I'm like, awesome. We'll get some inspiration there. And then hopefully adjusted some of my settings. I like never account for the Wi-Fi, but like one of the worst experiences is trying to watch somebody and them like disconnecting. So I think that should be fixed for today. Wonderful. All right. So as y'all know, yesterday, midpoint with The Last Scarecrow. So exciting. You know that point in a story where you either get like, for me, it always happens when I get halfway through the story or when I get within like that 10 to 15% mark from the end, where you just kind of get into this like writing frenzy because like you can see the goal in sight and the words and the story and the characters are just like coming to life out of you. That's definitely how I felt yesterday when I was writing the midpoint. It was so heartwarming. I think I was crying a little bit. Oh my goodness. When you have like just these characters I've been developing for quite some time and like the emotional stuff that happened to them. All right. So we're going to hop straight into our first writing sprint, 20 minutes. I need to actually read through the last part and make sure that it makes sense for what I was going for. So let me pull up my screen and I'll get my story. I'm going to read this last section, especially this like integral moment of the story. Now, let's see if you've been following along. Basically, all the characters are in the arena fighting each other. We have all the different groups of characters. We have the Tiger King and the primates. We have the Wolf King and the Wolf Pack. And then we have all the prisoners, the prison animals with the collars on them who are trying to escape. The Last Scarecrow is mixed in with there. The Crow is in there as well, trying to help them. And then the only characters not in there right now is the Pixie, the Otter, and the Pixie and the Otter are trying to save the dragon. So they're not involved in this, at least in this iteration. So this is what happened because this is crazy. So essentially, during this fight, the rabbit started coming at Scarecrow again, basically accusing the Scarecrow of all these different things that the Scarecrow hasn't done. In the rabbit's accusations, you've realized that the rabbit is actually psychotic. He has these unfounded accusations, and you're realizing that the rabbit's actually lost his mind, but he believes that the Last Scarecrow is like the root of all his problems, which isn't true based off these accusations. So in the rabbit's fury to kill the Last Scarecrow, the rabbit basically backs the Last Scarecrow into a corner. And up until this point in the story, the Last Scarecrow is kind of a passive protagonist. A lot of things happen to him. He gets consistently captured. Usually his friends save him. And usually he's the victim 9 times out of 10 up until this point. Well, in this moment, the rabbit is about to kill him. Crow flies in and takes the blade and takes the hit from Last Scarecrow. Last Scarecrow holds his friend who's dying, and then in a moment of rage, he screams out, and that anger unleashes in this like crazy lighting effect that basically like light shoots out of the crow's eyes and like the whole world light brightens up. Then we experience the background of the crow's past. And this entire experience is the exact same experience that the Scarecrow had when he was with the mentor character earlier on in the story. Essentially, the Scarecrow was given the power by the robot, by the last robot, to be able to see and help characters, animals remember their past. But he's just realizing this with Crow. He sees Crow's past, as Crow was known as a leader who fought in many wars and basically protected all of animal kind of his side and protected what's kind of like the world tree, which we call the nest, and at the cost of his family, who is basically eaten and mutilated. And then you see that is basically Crow's like crazy story. Now, these last 2 pages are right when they come out of the story. So let's see how it sounds. The last Scarecrow stood back in the arena, holding Crow out before him. The light disappeared from his eyes as he slowly looked up at Scarecrow. Crow whispered, "I remember. My younglings, my flock, were slaughtered, and I couldn't bear that loss." Crow tenderly lifted up one of his broken wings. The last Scarecrow held onto it. I don't know what I did. I don't," the last Scarecrow started. Crow raised his head, slowly whispering, "Thank you, my friend." Crow coughed out blood at the last Scarecrow's face. "I feel like a crow again." Crow dropped his wing, blood trailing down. Crow opened his eyes even wider. "Save the younglings for me." He coughed up a final series of blood. Crow dropped his head as his body went limp. The last Scarecrow held Crow out before him in such a state of shock that he hadn't realized the Colosseum had gone silent. The eyes of wolves and primates, tigers and skunk, jaguar and bear, and all the other animals were focused on him. The last Scarecrow dropped to his knees, holding Crow's lifeless body in his arms. He looked down at his friend, but before he even had time to process, the shield surrounding the arena shattered, and a demonic voice echoed throughout the sky. "Found you, Scarecrow." That's right. 20 minutes on the clock. Music up. We're going to throw up some epic battle music. I love what I wrote. In the rewrite, I know I need to edit. I really need to work on some of the animal characters and making the supporting characters just fine tune. But I'm excited. All right, let's get to this. If you're just joining me, feel free to sit back, vibe with the music, and read along as I'm writing, or get some of your own development, writing, or editing done. Excellent. 20 minutes on the clock, and right now. I know. There's a reason I think I was crying yesterday when I was writing this. I'm going to kill off a character. I know. I know. What a perfect stopping point. Perfecto. I was like, it's always sometimes like I have to find a good stopping point, and I'm like, all right, what a great stopping point. Okay. But reunion or not, I think we have a problem. ... Oh man, I'm like, I was thinking about like what really had to come next with the story because Crow's death it's huge. And it's like when you have a big like not only did Crow die, but we also have now had some demon character speaking to some demonic voice speaking at Scarecrow. Two major things. So I realized that the only way that I can really move this along in a way that's going to be effective right now, Scarecrow is going to be extremely unreliable. So that means that I wanted Pebble to be the other point of view. So we're actually going to get a better vantage of what we're seeing from the outside. As such, we have Pebble and Otter, who now just saved Blue. But clearly, Ottie's realizing that something's wrong. So we'll come right back to it. But fun times. Killing off a character. Okay, and let me throw up a 10-minute break. Excellent. Let's throw up the break. Clearly I'm so excited with where I'm at in the story. But you know that feeling when you're working on a story, you're working on your characters, and you have to kill off a character. It's the worst. It is the worst. But it was like, tonally, from a story development, like it is exactly what needed to happen. And I knew it was the perfect moment for where the story's at with Last Scarecrow. Like, oh God. But what are you gonna do? But actually, so speaking of characters, let me throw up this banner. Let's see. Nope, forgot to do that. But speaking of characters, it was like perfect time to talk about developing characters in your story. And I'm going to change that to a non-banner. Perfect. So I was like, what perfect way to talk about developing characters in your story? Obviously, stories are driven by characters, and people connect with characters. If you don't have compelling characters in your story, regardless of the format, whether it's a short story, novel, script, even poetry, people aren't going to connect with it. Now, you might not be writing a fantasy story with all these different like point of view characters. You could be writing a story where it's like your point of view, but even as a narrator is still a character. It's telling the story from a different vantage point, but the narrator is just as much of a character as is and a fictitious character from a fantasy or a thriller story or whatever you're working on. So I thought it was the perfect thing to really talk about, like, how do you develop characters? Now, when I think about characters, and you've seen me during my process as I've been creating them, as I've been going throughout the story. Now, the primary characters are the ones that I've put the most development into. My three major heroes: the Last Scarecrow, Crow, who Crow just met his untimely demise, and then Pebble. Those have been the three predominant heroes throughout the first 50% of the story. Now, as I've been working over, I want to say probably like about the past 5 chapters or so, the first 40,000 words, so the first like 40% of the story, the primary characters were just Scarecrow, Crow, and Pebble. But as we got to this point, now I've introduced a whole cast of different animals and characters. I've introduced a lot, right? So, and I asked myself, how do you create supporting characters, and is that the right characters to create for this moment in the story? Right now I'm putting characters in and I'm kind of giving them like story arcs that I think would be really cool to play around with. There's a couple select characters who I've intentionally created them, and I've already developed a notion of what I want them to be like, because I know that they're going to be a little bit more integral to the plot in the back half of Last Scarecrow, or further on as I'm developing the world. So, and by the way, if you're just hopping into the stream, welcome. We're actually just talking about character development. If not if, but when you're working on your story, how do you come up with like creating a character? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear like what your character creation process is. And like, how do you figure out like, all right, this is like enough characters for my story, or maybe I need to have like certain character types? Like, what works for you? Let's see. Let me pull up comments. Hey, what's up, Akio in the house? Welcome, welcome, my friend. It's character. We're going through some. I'm going through some tragic times with my story, Akio. I killed off one of my main characters. I cried on the inside, maybe a little bit on the outside yesterday. If I have like one of my friends or family ask me, they're like, Jared, so how's your live streams going? I'll be like, well, I cried on live stream. And they'll be like, I was like, it was great. I know it's always a challenge. But like when we're defining characters, right now I'm at a point where I've set up a couple other major character types or another character types. And I've tried to give each of these like supporting characters, I've tried to give them a defining story or like a defining obstacle or struggle. Now, if there's a character, so let's consider our main characters are the ones who are going to be the major story, whose their character arc is going to revolve around the central plot. Supporting characters, their stories may affect the plot or it may not, but the stories that we're going to tell are helping to build either the world or they're helping to develop our main heroes. Right now, I only have 3 heroes. Well, technically with Crow Dead, I technically have 2 heroes, but we're about to embark on this next section of our story where now we're going to be adding a couple more heroes. So once you've created the heroes or once you've created the characters, how do you figure out like how much time do I give to a character and how do I do it believably so that way they feel important, that they resonate with your reader or your audience? If you're writing a script, how do they resonate and how do they feel believable? For me, so that way I feel like I want them to feel like they have depth, but I don't want them to feel too basic. I create a character with a single motivation, story arc, obstacle thing that they have to overcome during my rough draft. Now it's a little different for the Scarecrow, the Pixie, and the Crow because I took time outside of the storytelling to really develop them. But as I'm writing, if I'm coming up with characters on the spot, I have the type of character they are, what they have to overcome, and then what are some ideas of like, okay, these are things that could happen. Now, I'm at a point in my story where I probably have about, I want to say I might have like about like, there's probably like a good like 20 characters in that arena itself. And I'm like, okay, so how do I figure out, do I have too many characters or do I have the right number of characters? So let's join me. I'm trying to think. I have to think about how many characters I actually have. Let's see. Let me see. Atomic, what do you got? So for the protagonist in my series, I've assigned him an Enneagram personality type. His flaws will be in line with the unhealthy expression of his personality. You know, I think I should know what Enneagram means. I'm gonna go with that. I see it. Based off like a personality test is an archetypal framework consisting of the 9 types. Okay, that makes sense. Interesting. His flaws will be in line with the unhealthy expression of his personality. That's a really good strategy because then you're working into developing the character through their psychology. And that's actually very important because like we connect with people and that's going to make your character more believable. I don't think I've tried that process before, but that's actually a really interesting process. Do you feel like that's been effective for you, Atomic, and kind of like the character that you've been developing? Have you done that for other series or is this something that you're like just trying out? When as I think about all the characters I'm developing with Last Scarecrow, so like supporting characters that I've just created, I want to say I have. All right, so starting with the group. So starting with Scarecrow's friends, I have Gore the bear, Stretch the snake, and then the chaotic rabbit. And then in terms of Pebble, I have the blue dragonkin. Technically, I had the gold dragonkin and the red one, but I've kind of sent them away. They're not really going to be predominant characters, so I'm not going to include them. And then in terms of Crow's posse, we had the otter. So we technically had the otter, the skunk, and the squirrel. Who I've given like some screen time or given time to. I've given the squirrel some screen time. I haven't decided if I want to give her more time or not. And then outside of those groups, now we have the other animals they're dealing with, right? So we have the two antagonists. We have the Tiger King and the Wolf King. The Tiger King we've really set up. And then we have the Tiger King sidekick, Marchek the primate. So when I think about characters that I have right now at this point in the story, I have about 10 characters who I've given a decent amount of development, or at least some type of development. Now, as I move into the next part of the story, 10 characters is going to be too much for me to really keep telling the story that I want to resonate with. So far in the first half, I focused on 3. As I move into the second half of the story, I'm probably going to be sticking, well, technically now it's Scarecrow and the Pixie. So I'm probably going to be upping their group count to 5. I think 5 is what's feeling right for me. And while I know that I know one of them that I want definitively, I'm kind of playing around with like, what do I think are going to be good balances for the other characters that I now include along the next step of their journey. Let's see, Joel. MBTI is a very accurate personality test too. Ooh, that's actually really good. I'm actually going to write both these down, both Enneagram and MBTI. These are great strategies. I'm going to create a banner. Consider character development. Let's see, Enneagram or Enneagram. Perfect. That gets a cool banner. Awesome. I'm going to throw that at the bottom because I think that's actually really cool, both of you. I think like using personality tests and using that type for like to develop the psychology. That's interesting. That's not something that I would have considered trying, but like reading both of those and like what I know about personality tests, which I agree with, that's actually a really smart way to develop a character. It's an atomic. Then I'm using the flaw, shard of glass, internal cause. What does he want? Goal that leads to trouble, but what does he need? Life lesson. Interesting. So the flaw is the problem. Basically like the thing they're going to have to overcome about themselves. The shard of glass is the internal. What's the reason for the problem? What does he want? Goal that leads to trouble. Yep. But what does he need? That's actually interesting. A lot of times in screenwriting, I see this with, I remember learning this a lot, is clarifying for characters, what do they want versus what do they need? Because it makes it a little easier when you're creating obstacles and you're creating like things that need to happen to the characters. A lot of times as writers, we want to like create cool things that happen, but a lot of times like beginner writers won't always think about like, not just what do they want, but what does the character actually need? Because what they need is going to be the end result of all the obstacles that happen. That's cool. Atomic, based off that portion, it kind of sounds like you have like, is that like a system that you've, or is that like a storytelling structure that you've pulled from someone? Or is that your own that you've kind of refined over time? That's awesome. When you find a system that works, like more power to you. And I think that's one of the things I love about the writing process, right? There's so many different ways to go about creating a character, developing a world, telling a story, dialogue, and all the things. And the fun part is we get to create our own process. We get to pick and choose. We see processes that work. You hear from the big writers like, yeah, this thing worked, and this thing worked. I'm of the belief that you should try all the things. You should try the different processes. But at the end of the day, you're going to create your own process, your own system that works for you. One system that works for one writer isn't necessarily going to work for another. But sometimes they're interchangeable and sometimes they do. And I think that's super cool. And I'm like definitely thinking about this thing. I'm like really curious to see, Atomic, if this is a system that you've developed or if it's one that you've found from like a pre-existing like character development system. You know, something really interesting. I'm not in my studio right now. Like I wish I would pull this book. But when I was younger, one of my like favorite books when I was writing my very first story, well, it was like the guide. I want to say it's the guide on how to write fantasy. And it went over all these different systems for like character, world building, dialogue, and all the things. I remember just like absorbing that and then trying to incorporate that so much into my storytelling. It was super helpful, but like my problem early on was I was sticking to one system and some things worked and some things didn't, but I was trying to employ them all. It took me years and years of just like practicing. And even with where I'm at now, I'm not perfect. I like write things. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But the part I love about the rough draft is you give yourself the freedom and the room to breathe and create because you can always go back and fix it on the second draft. Let's say I'm using Save the Cat, writes a novel for a story. Interesting. You know, Atomic, I haven't read the Save the writes a novel story. Is it pretty helpful? I love Save the Cat. Save the Cat is probably one of my like favorite storytelling structures, but I think that's probably like 50% of the system that I use. Especially because I took it when I was doing a lot of screenwriting and I kind of took part of that system and I probably combined it with like 2 or 3 other systems that worked for me, but that was definitely a huge basis. But I was basing it off the screenwriting structure, and the screenwriting beat by beat breakdown, I want to say is like 15 points. It's essentially like a 3-act structure, but it's broken down by 15 points. That's actually super cool though, that there's a novel version for Saves the Cat. I'm going to have to check that out. That personality thing is something I got from an interview. Yeah, that's cool. It's crazy the things that you learn. Like I never would have thought of using personality tests, but like that's ingenious. It's ingenious. Like these are things that we test for ourselves, right? And I think that's such a great framework for like building the psychology behind a character. That's super cool. Maybe I'll give that a shot. Maybe I'll try a personality test for one of these characters. I'm fascinated by that. Excellent. All right. So clearly our timer's up. So I'm going to hop back into a writing sprint number 2. Let's see. It seems to make sense. I'm still looking into other story structure systems, but I've noticed so far many of them have a lot of commonalities. There's a lot of truth to that. It's because storytelling at heart, people resonate with story based off like I think there's a lot of core themes, and it's funny, but I think a lot of storytelling structures all the time resonate or not resonate's not the right word, but have a lot of inherent patterns from the hero's journey, which is like probably one of the most well-known writing development arcs for a character. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there's so many, and I'm not surprised by that. I think we see so many different like types of structures, and I think that different types kind of help different people, but makes sense. All right. Oh, and by the way, let's see, I'm gonna keep that banner down because I think that's awesome. Are you enjoying the stream? Don't forget to follow and subscribe. I do these live streaming, writing sessions every single day for the foreseeable future. Today is day 86 of my 366-day challenge to write for 30 minutes a day every day for a year. Now my 30 minutes a day has kind of become like 45 minutes a day to an hour because I'm on a good roll with Last Scarecrow. But yeah, follow, subscribe, writing live streams to just come and hang out. Right now, Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Saturday, Sundays, 2 p.m. So that way you'll be alerted when I go live. I also do weekly shorts and videos that revolve more around writing technique and how to help you become a better writer. All right, perfect. So we're going to hop into writing sprint number 2. Let me reset the timer. All right, excellent. And beautiful. Save the Cat writes a novel, uses a 15-story beats, but also gives a description of 10 different types of story arcs with examples of each. Okay, yeah, so he uses the same framework, but also gives a description of 10 different types of story arcs. That actually makes sense. If I was writing a book like that, I'd probably do the same thing. His, I want to say I think it's the second or the third Save the Cat book, which was the first 3 Save the Cat books, I believe, were all screenwriting focused. But I want to say it was like the third one was literally just an entire book of script of film examples. So I'm actually not surprised he used that same idea when he did the novel version of it. I'm definitely going to check it out because I really want to read that. It's been a while, and I think it's also important to brush up on storytelling techniques all the time. All right, perfecto. So I got 20 minutes on the clock. Feel free to tag along. Let's see what shenanigans. Let's see if what's going to happen with Last Scarecrow. So 20 minutes, and it's time to get the music first. Atomic, I got your playlist. Atomic Elf playlist mix number 1. DJ Atomic Elf. All right, 20 minutes on the clock, and let's ride. Interesting. I actually didn't know that author passed. Snyder, I believe. Blake Snyder. Well, it's unfortunate he passed away. That's unfortunate. But it's cool. It sounds like if they use the brand to keep doing it in different methods. It's interesting. I'm still going to check it out regardless. Okay, that is a good stopping point. Oh man. Once again, another really good writing sprint. So I realized with that section, like, so I ended up going back in time a little bit. Like, I knew that I needed to get Pebble and the otter and the dragonkin back into the picture. And I intentionally left them out of the main drama because I needed an outside perspective because I really wanted them to witness the a third party of what actually just happened. Now, when I do the rewrite in the second draft, I might interweave some of their action conflict a little earlier on so that way them witnessing it times up a little bit better. Um because like the crow death scene, like that's a lot. The scene's very emotional, and I'll have to go back and read through it to feel like, okay, does it make sense for crow death, demon voice, and then Pebble and Otter rush in and come into it right after, or does having that moment of Otter and Pebble, little lighthearted moment, does that kind of create a nice kind of like change of pace? And I'll have to figure that out. So, but that was a good little writing session. Whew, man. So we'll get to see what happens to our characters because clearly the demonic voice, clearly something is about to go down. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. What do we got here? Thanks for joining me today. If you're going to catch me tomorrow, like I said, I'm here Monday through Friday. Let's see, tomorrow's stream will be Wednesday, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'll be here with some more writing experience and stuff. We'll have some more writing vibes and talk about more ways to help you become a better writer, maybe give you some inspiration, either or. So I'll be here. And don't forget, hit that like button on the way out. Let me know that you got some value out of this. I appreciate it. I always like coming in, getting some writing done, and hang out with y'all. That's all that I got for you today, writer friends. I'm Kaufman, and I'll catch you on the flip side. All right, get some writing done.